In this lesson, we're gonna go through sequences, how to use them, and through some rules, what can be done and what cannot be done. So first, let's create our sequence. It's gonna be by the syntax that we learned in the last lesson. We're adding sequence options as increment by 10, which means that the sequence number will be increased by 10. We're gonna start with 1000, so our first sequence value is gonna be 1000. It's gonna cycle, so once it reaches the max value, it's gonna start from the beginning, and the max value is defined as 1050. So let's create that sequence. And the first thing that we're gonna learn about sequences is the functions that we can call directly from the sequence name. And those are current value and the next value. The current value returns the number of the sequence that is in the current state, and the next value goes to the next value of the sequence and returns that number. So the first rule we're gonna learn is that the current value cannot be called until the sequence is initiated, and that happens once the next value is executed. So if you try to call the current value of our newly created sequence, this is gonna fail, as the error log also shows that this sequence is not yet defined in the session. However, if we call the next value, we're gonna get returned that value, and if we call that current value, it's gonna work just fine. Very nice. So as we said that sequences are predominantly used to populate primary keys, we're gonna create a table, a simple one, named sequence table, with prime ID of number type and some text of varchar type. So let's create it, and our insert statement shows how to use the sequence. So we can call directly the sequence name and its function of next value. So let's insert a couple of records, and let's check the state of the table. Now we can see that we got two values since we executed the insert statement twice. You can see that we got 1010 and not 1000, since we already called once the next value function for that sequence. As the sequence works in a session, and not even the rollback resets the state of a sequence, by calling each time the next value function, we're gonna increase the counter on that sequence. So if I check the current value of the sequence, we're gonna get 10,020, and we can execute the next value again. So we are just selecting it from the dual table, and next time when we insert the value into our table, if we check the state of that table, we can see that sequence skipped one value, right? Let's insert a couple more rows to see how this sequence behaves as by the options that we defined when creating it. So I'm gonna enter a couple of more rows, and let's check the state of the table. Now, if we look back, we can see that we have the max value of 1050, and we got the cycle. Since we defined the cycle, the sequence when it reaches the max value, it's gonna start from the beginning. Now you would think it would start with 1000 as we defined. However, once the cycle ends, it will start from the default, which is the number 1 in our case, as we didn't define the min value. If we define the min value as, for example, 900, then once the max value has been reached, next cycle is gonna start with that number. Very simple. There are several more rules on handling the sequences, where they can be used and where they cannot be used. We've gone through a couple of those, but do check the resources file under this lesson to see all of the rules, as any of those could come up on the exam, and it's good to know them for the actual job. And be sure to practice this out. Try to create sequences with different sequence options and call those sequences to see how they behave. This is it for this section, and see you in the next one.